Hey, Lifespans class, this is Dr. Ang, and I am here to deliver content from chapters 7 and 8, and we are focusing today on the preschool child. And this is the stage after infancy and after toddlerhood, and it's termed the stage preschool age because it's actually the stage preschool, prior to formal school. And it's the stage where we are getting the child hopefully ready for a formal operational style of schooling or education. So it's that stage where we're kind of bridging over to getting a little bit of independence, and we're going to launch them out into a formal school system, whether that be more at home and homeschool setting. It can still be a formal method of education for that child. It's typically the ages of 2 and 6. Some experts say and define the stage as 3 to 6. Regardless, it's right in this stage, right before formal school. Developmental milestones for the preschooler. The preschooler is developing at a very, very rapid rate. They're moving from a caregiver, primarily doing and meeting all the ADLs, activities of daily living, to moving into a stage where they're going to start to independently take on and assume some of these responsibilities. This can be seen in areas of play, learning, speaking, their ability to communicate with the world around them in an appropriate manner, the way they behave. How do they behave when they don't get something they want? This is typically a stage when we can see the preschooler still in preschool years, early preschool years, laying on the floor, kicking and screaming in the line at the grocery store, whatever that may be. How, as they assume the consequences of that behavior, we're hoping that they are going to transition to more an appropriate way to communicate and behave, not only in social settings and at home as well, but we're going to be practicing on that hopefully during these stages. So once they enter formal schooling, they're able to then conduct themselves in an appropriate manner. They also are looking for, as they seek independence, and they're also looking for more meaningful relationships. What has been a very tight nucleus of whatever that home environment looks like. If there are two parents and a sibling, or there may be raised by grandparents, they may be raised by a caregiver, whatever that looks like, that is their nucleus that they have known. And for some kids, it's difficult, and there can bring about a little bit of separation anxiety as they move into being around other individuals that are going to assume some of those caregiving responsibilities during the day. So as they transition into meeting new teachers and new friends, there will be a transition stage there. So supporting them through that as they seek to find their independence and seek to find meaningful relationships. They represent the world symbolically. So this is also the child that has been, even if they're not, if they have limited screen time, they still have been exposed to cartoons and superheroes and things. So they tend to relate that to the world around them in symbolic ways. So maybe dad is thought to be the hero, and in their mind wearing the cape and can do no wrong and can fix anything and do anything. Mom may be the role model that if anything happens to them, symbolically, she's going to need to be the one that steps in and cares for them. So if they fall down, they may cry for mom. They may have hard time transitioning to that the teacher or the school nurse can help them with their needs, because in their mind, symbolically, mom takes care of those needs. Also, when it comes to a teacher, the teacher that they have in kindergarten in their mind will always be their teacher. So when they move to first grade, transition to other grades, subsequent grades, in their mind, there will be one face that represents teacher to them. So symbolically, symbolization is very important to the preschooler. So they will transition also into, now they can name colors, or they're going to be able to show affection, show appropriate emotions. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry, but that doesn't mean that you need to fall on the floor and kick and scream. It doesn't mean if you're angry, you need to go and rip a toy out of another child's hand or hit that child. You need to communicate your needs and desires and feelings in an appropriate manner. And that is challenging for the preschooler oftentimes. They can, whereas we've had the infant is crawling and then transitioning into pulling up and walking. And as you come through as a toddler, they start to walk somewhat independently. Now for the preschooler, we're going to start to master some of those skills. I can now stand on 2 feet, but now as a preschooler, I'm going to hop, jump, skip. Now I can hop on 1 foot. I can master these skills. That's why when they're developing at such a rapid rate, it's good to expose the preschooler to a lot of different activities so that we can fine-tune some of those gross motor skills as well as those fine motor skills. So as children begin to grow in early childhood, their world begins to open up all around them. So that's from people, that's different experiences. Some personalities and preschoolers are going to be more open to this and inviting to this, while others are going to tend to migrate back to that nucleus that they've known through infancy and as a toddler. So they become more independent and begin to notice adults and children beyond their family unit. So now where it's been their tight nucleus, they're going to notice the teacher. They're going to start to notice and be open to other companions to play with where it has been maybe a sibling. They're going to start to branch out. And typically it's going to be same-sex students and other children that they're going to migrate to. Some will be slower to this, while other personalities might run in and be very eager to open up to new faces. But that also will be characteristic of the preschool child. Their surroundings, people, and activities begin to shape their world. That's why when we refer to this stage as being the sponge, you want to be careful for a preschooler what they're watching on television or screens, what they're seeing and what they're exposed to, because as their world begins to open up, they're going to absorb these, and things that they see, they're going to do, things that they hear, they're going to say. So that's why it's very important that the environment that your child is being cultivated in is very particular. We're very particular of what we're in investing into the minds of a preschool child. During this stage, a preschooler will also begin to ride a bike or fine-tune something, playground equipment, different things like this, whereas they were maybe content in a living room floor or a small area. Now they want to explore, and they want to explore new things, whether it's a 3-wheel, typically at this stage, a 3-wheel tricycle, whatever type of vehicle that they can explore at this stage. And then they're going to transition into watching older siblings or watching other people on the playground and thinking that they can do the activity as well. That's why we tend, we'll talk about this later, to be more accident prone in this stage. There's a false sense of what their abilities are. As their world all of a sudden opens up, they're eager to explore, and a lot of times accidents can happen in that stage. So close supervision is also important as we seek to find line or balance, seek to nurture and foster independence in that child, but also to keep them safe. Meaningful and safe relationships are critical in this stage. Again, if it's a babysitter, if it's any kind of caregiver, what kind of environment that you have them in, going to other friends' house, whatever that may be. If you have a child that's very trusting, you want to make sure that they're safe in every environment. So physical growth. At age 2 or 3, a child is assumed to be half of his or her adult height. So I'm going to say that again. At age 2, around 2-ish, when they go for that 2-year checkup, it's generally can be said you can double that and then get a rough estimate of what their adult height will be. So let's say a 2-year-old boy, if he's approximately 3 feet tall, then he's going to be approximately give or take a little, this is not exact science, but an estimate, of approximately a 6-foot adult male. Okay, I want you to look on Harvey. I have posted the growth and development charts. So we have growth charts for height as well as weight. And you can look at those when we're in class. Sometimes we'll take time to actually plot these out. But you can print that or just pull it up and look, and you'll see the curve. So you can see if a child is along the average means or falls below or above that. You can kind of plot that on there and see where a child falls. They will most likely do this during your pediatrician visits for a preschooler, but it's kind of interesting to do that on your own as well, because typically they're not paper. Now they're done on a computer, so you don't have as much access to that. But you can always ask and request to see that information to kind of see where the preschooler falls in relationship to other preschoolers, his or her age. So let's see, I'll also hit really quickly. And an average 6-year-old is approximately 46 pounds and 46 inches. That kind of gives you an estimate as well, knowing that each child growth and development will be specific to them. So there's not an exact science to this, but this is just estimates. So height and weight, 3 inches per year and 4 pounds per year is typically what we're going to see during the preschool years. So what is the greatest risk, excuse me, that I've kind of alluded to already? What is the greatest risk for a preschooler? And we know that is accidents. As they gain their independence and they seek, their world is now opened up and they charge out eager to explore their new surroundings and new activities. They often can't find their place as far as what am I, and we want them to be independent and we want them to explore, but in a safe way. And a lot of times a preschooler remains so busy, it's oftentimes difficult to keep up, or especially in a school setting, when you imagine you have 20, 25 preschoolers, a lot of times accidents can happen of thinking that they can do something that they haven't mastered yet. And maybe they've done this with supervision or they've watched an older sibling. And then when there's not direct supervision, then they attempt it on their own. And a lot of times accidents can happen during this stage. Their bodies are growing at a rapid rate, so they become accident prone. They're inquisitive, which is good, but then you couple that with they're also impulsive, which can then lead to possible risk of injury. So whatever you call it, boo-boos, injuries, whatever, are very common at this stage. I think this is the stage that probably keeps the Band-Aid business out there and as a strong front, because there's constant injuries along the stage. You interview any school nurse and they're going to say constantly being in and out seen by preschoolers with injuries that are requiring a Band-Aid. Because they're somewhat, that's almost their badge of honor, that they're somewhat proud of that. If they have injuries or they have Band-Aids to show for it, that's kind of their badge of honor for this stage. Then falls. Let's see, falls are of great risk for the preschooler. The child can often fall off playground equipment, as we've mentioned, as they're kind of growing into their bodies and still mastering all those gross motor skills and controlling their body. They can often trip or fall down stairs. They can fall off bikes and tricycles as they're trying to learn and master these new skills, because there's so many new things that they're trying until they've mastered it. And even after, they can still have injuries with that. Then going to the next slide, also firearms. This is why this is so critical that we have firearms locked up, because when, again, inquisitive and impulsive, couple that with a trifecta of adding a firearm in there, and that obviously is an accident waiting to happen. So again, educating on this is critical. Have to lock up and having safekeeping firearms around any child, but particularly around a preschooler. And we ask why would that be also? What about all the video games and movies that a preschooler can be seen, even when the caregivers don't realize that the preschooler is back watching? What always happens typically in a video game? It starts over and the person that is just shot hops up and takes off, and then they go again. So the preschooler can't see through that and see the finality of an actual firearm to someone and the damage and the permanency of that damage. They were too desensitized, if you will, with video games or movies or whatever that case might be. So burns, again, this is toddler, excuse me, again, I would say into maybe early preschoolers. By the time you're getting to the end of preschoolers, hopefully the conversations have had, maybe even some accidents have taken place that are going to solidify the importance and the danger of touching things that are hot. But when it comes to pots on the stove, grabbing that, trying to look in, and it can be just inquisitive of, I'm wanting to see if there's any more mac and cheese in that pot. You know, my mom or my caregiver or whoever, dad is outside working, I'm just going to help myself because I'm independent now. I can get it myself, reaching up and grabbing the pot, not realizing it may be full of boiling water or it may be full of hot food, whatever the case may be, and burns taking place with that. Little girl coming in and seeing a curling iron next to the mom's vanity and not realizing that the cord that's plugged into the wall could very well mean that's hot, and grabbing that. When it comes to fires, on the weekend I go and I was able to roast a marshmallow. Now I see a fire in the fireplace and mom has ran into the kitchen for a minute. I think I'm going to go over there and play with this fire, when not realizing obviously the danger there. Curiosity when it comes to bottles underneath the sink, when it comes to medicine bottles in a bathroom or in your grandmother's purse. Just curiosity, inquisitive, and then impulsive, not taking time to ask, but impulsively popping pills that they think are candy, or they see a caregiver that takes a medication and it seems to be fine, so they take the medication. So just things like that can lead to either chemical poisonings that are underneath a sink, this type of thing, or a variety of, but that can also lead into medications as well. Car seat safety, this is the stage during preschool years are when a caregiver has always buckled me in. Now I don't need help with that. I can do it myself. Then you find out you're a few miles down the road and you look back and the preschooler's jumping around in the back seat. Or they can just take it off. They either never buckle themselves or they're able to take it on and off independently. So you have to watch for that, as well as just making sure that as they start to grow and feel like that they have outgrown the car seat, that you stay with the car seat guidelines for that child. Choking hazards as well, putting things in their mouth, exploring things, exploring the way things taste, feel, whatever, putting things, even when they're out playing on the playground, they're out in the yard seeing berries, different things that are not to be put in the mouth. Coins, this is when we see a lot of coins coming into the emergency room. X-ray will show that they've swallowed a penny. Different things that they can do. More recently one is the bottle caps off of bottles of water, different things that they put in their mouth or they chew on. Next thing it's down and they've swallowed it, and it's a choking hazard. So car seat safety, I do have a slide here for car seat safety. The best way to keep your child in the car seat is correctly put the seat in an appropriate manner, and you to double check that each time, regardless of how old they are and they're trying to convince you they can do it themselves. Maybe you just stand there and watch them do it. So yes, they are having their independence on doing it themselves, but you just ensure that it's safely done. And again, we're referencing there's a much difference between a 2 or 3 year old than a 6-year-old. So some of this we're discussing will transition quite a bit during the preschool years from an early preschooler to a late preschooler. There's also something you can reference if someone ever asks you. The fire station, there are different hospitals will put on car seat safety checks, and a lot of car seats, as they're constantly changing and evolving, you'll get a car seat and it's actually very confusing sometimes of how to appropriately put that car seat and install that car seat. So if you want to double check and make sure that your child or the preschooler is safe, you can stop by any of the car seat checkpoints or reference someone to that as well. The growing brain of a preschool is fascinating. By the age of 6, their brains are 90% of adult weight, but their bodies are only 30% of that weight. So what is that into? That kind of feels like it's a cartoon character where they're very top heavy. Their brain is 90% of the adult weight. So that's almost to the adult weight, but then with the 30% of their adult body. So they have a lot to grow into to that brain. Gray matter for a 3 to 5-year-old is increasing. However, the preschooler is still unable to view the world through a mature adult brain. So they're starting to formulate and mature, but it's not to the point that they can follow through and think things through. That's what we were mentioning with the risk of injuries is so prominent in this age, because they're expanding, so they realize that the opportunities are there, but they can't think through to the end result and the finality of certain things, or think, if I put this cap in my mouth, I might swallow it, and that would require me possibly a surgical procedure at the hospital that would cost a lot of money and be very scary and might even take my life if I'm not careful. They don't think through the final steps. They explore it right at this moment, and that impulsive behavior is what's leading to the accident. So just seeing the way that gray matter is forming is kind of fascinating for the preschooler. A preschooler needs to feel safe and secure in order to explore the world with confidence. So if you have an overbearing caregiver in this stage, that every time let's say, for example, they try to dress themselves, if an overbearing caregiver is standing over them saying, don't wear that, don't do that, you're too slow, what are you doing, that looks dumb, why can't you do it like your sister, just constantly belittling or hovering, or, oh, forget it, I'll just do it for you. That's not going to create an open and inviting invitation to explore the world and to seek that independence. So just the influence, again, on the relationships around them are going to foster a lot during this stage. And am I invited and encouraged to explore the world around me, or am I held back and limited? We're going to get into Erickson's stage in a minute. You're going to see how that applies. Okay, left brain versus right brain. This is kind of a cool activity. You may know this for yourself, but it's neat to see, and you're going to see this start to emerge, particularly among a preschool child. So on the left side, we have language, numbers, and analytical thinking. But then on the right side, complementing that is expression, emotional intelligence, imagination, that creativity side. So we have the left side with the logic, LL, left side logic, and then we have the right side that is fostering creativity. Visual pathways increase as a child can trace objects and eventually look at an object and replicate it on a page. So at this stage, whereas as they form letters, even, you can think of this on their name. They can recognize their name probably up until this stage, but now I'm going to look at my name and I'm going to replicate that myself. That is also indicative of and specific to the preschool age of when that can occur. The right hemisphere growth will help with expression, and when they communicate with their caregivers and those around them, they're going to start to notice a very beautiful, colorful world around them that they're eager to explore, and that is also from the right hemisphere. Motor development, we have the gross and then fine motor skills that are developing during this stage. And we're also going to find out, it's going to emerge if they're going to be, what hand dominance they are, whether they're going to be right or left will come through this stage. Gross motor skills develop and occupy most of the time for a preschool child. And again, as we've talked about with cephalocaudal development, or we'll go from head to toe development, or proximal distal will be from gross motor skills out to more the fine motor skills. That is going to be also evident during this stage. So they're going to be able to, they're going to be able to hit or throw a ball. They'll be able to do that before, obviously, they're going to be able to maybe string beads and make a bracelet or a necklace. So it's the larger movements that are going to form first, followed by the fine motor skill. And some of those take practice. And most importantly, they take patience on the part of a caregiver. So if you're going to rush in and just do it and don't have the patience for that, then probably don't bring out a pipe cleaner and some beads, because that is going to take quite a bit of time while they practice and then master that skill. And that will come on the heels of the gross motor development. Also during this time, this is when we're going to master skills. And as you'll find in classrooms, a lot of time for the developmental, there will be centers that focus on different things, maybe a cognitive logic type thing center, and then you may have one with Legos that is fine-tuning building, one that's artistic and creative with colors and painting, different things. But you'll notice you're working different aspects at each one as you seek to fine-tune those fine motor skills. So intellectual development, increase in creativity and imagination. Piaget's stage of pre-operational thinking lasts from ages 2 to 6. Symbolic thinking and pretend play, as we've mentioned, are important in this stage. Preschoolers learning to use thought to solve problems and learning to know and communicate with the world through symbols and through primary language. Now the child can recall events and stories that they've heard. So if they sit down and gather around the teacher and hear story time, often in the car ride home to the caregiver, they may be able to replicate that story very, very accurately during this stage. Although the child can recall and recognize concepts, it does not mean that they are logical about the world around them. So know the difference between they can recall facts and that they clearly understand and interpret those facts that they hear. Symbolic thinking is when a preschooler uses an object to represent another, often convincing themselves is actually the desired object. So this is where they see their caregiver often on the phone many hours a day, maybe on the cell phone. So they're holding a block and have it up to their ear, or they have a banana or something, and now they too have a cell phone. This can also be lining up objects on the floor and racing them around like it's a race car, or sitting on a box and holding an object and pretending they're driving a car, or setting up pots and pans still in the earlier stages and hitting on them and pretending they're in a band. Whatever the case may be, objects will be symbols for other things. Let's see, pretend play. The preschooler can identify objects to take the role of mom, policeman, nurse, or fireman. So they can pretend to be these things, and by dressing up in high heels and your mom's necklace and wearing her favorite blouse, all of a sudden they have transformed themselves into mom. For that moment, they are mom. They can put on a tie and their dad's shoes, and in that moment they are dad. Or when they have dress up or community service days at school and they come in dressed as a fireman, they are in their mind a fireman that day. So the symbols of what that individual wears or that superhero wears, when they are wearing that, they have assumed that role. So symbols are very important, very real to the preschooler. Egocentrism. children are unable to understand and fully the concept of conservation as well, and then emerge in intuitive thought. So egocentrism it is all about me. If I want that toy, I will grab that toy. I won't think of the repercussions of what will happen if I go, even though that is my friend, if they have a toy and I want it, or they're sitting in that seat, if I go and throw them out of that seat and sit in it, they don't think through, what's that going to do to my friendship? Or how does that look? That's not the kind of person that I want to be. That's not nice. They're in that moment, all about me stage, and if I want that seat, I'm going to go get that seat. So this is where we referenced in the very first slide. We're teaching them how to communicate with the world around them in an appropriate manner, teaching them cause and effect and consequences to the things we say and the things that we do. Also, conservation. Pay attention to this. This is important. Play-Doh. So if I roll Play-Doh up in a ball, or if I roll it out into a long tube shape, they can think that that's a different amount of Play-Doh. Even if they see you do it right in front of their eyes, they may not think that that is the same amount of Play-Doh. If you take 2 equal amounts and even take it out of the Play-Doh container and put it into 2 shapes, they may think in their mind that one is bigger and one is smaller. Also, water in a tall glass versus a short glass. They may think that there is more, even if they see you take the same amount of water and pour it into 2 containers, they may think that the taller glass has more water than the shorter glass. Also, pennies in a line, you can say, okay, I have 5 pennies. I'm going to line these 5 pennies up. These 5 pennies are touching. These 5 pennies may be spaced further apart. The preschooler, if asked, will assume that the one spaced out has more pennies, even though that they saw that both lines have 5 pennies. Once they see it due to spacing, they will tend to lean towards the line that's spaced out and be very convinced that there are more pennies in that line. You can see this too if you take a piece of food, if you whatever, and they can see if it's not, or a drink, and you happen to have 2 different, if you have two different types of glasses, and one happens to be slightly different size, in their mind, one of those is going to be the better option or the bigger option, and they'll have a hard time not getting the one that they feel in their mind is bigger, regardless. So conservation, that's this concept, and you'll want to be familiar with this as well. Intuitive thought is stimulated and cultivated by allowing a preschooler to ask questions and responding with an encouragement response. So when a preschooler asks 100 questions about something, it's very easy as a caregiver, if they are tired, if they are trying to do 10 other things, it's difficult, sometimes challenging, to be in that moment and to nurture that inquisitive nature and that independence of they want to know, they're starting to want to know why. So this is going to help when we were saying that they're only in that moment and they don't have that long-term thinking in place. This is how they're going to get that. They want to connect these dots, but as they're trying to connect them, that's going to require patience for that inquisitive nature and the multiple questions that will come from a preschooler. Egocentrism, again, I just touched on this, but Piaget concluded the preschool child is egocentric. They cannot perceive things from another's viewpoint. They only see things from their viewpoint. While speaking on the telephone, a child often might use yes or no responses or just shake their head, not realizing the person on the other end of the line can't hear them shake their head one way or the other. They usually have created a mental image of the other person, what they feel he or she will look like. And again, if they know that they're going to meet their first grade teacher, they're going to, in their mind, envision their kindergarten teacher. That's also part of the preschooler. Information processing, memory. How specific or accurate is memory? not overly connecting and holding on lasting memories before the age of 3 years old. Although there are some that say, I remember very vividly something that happened when I was 2, and that does happen. But for the most part, we're not solidifying points of our memory until around the age of 3, as far as recalling accurate details. As a child goes through the preschool years, though, there's going to be more accuracy, and that will increase in as far as their memory. As they connect dots and formulate that to other aspects, they're going to be able to recall facts and then start to add supporting details to that, which helps us to solidify a concept in our memory. Information processing, increasingly more complex, so they are going to continue to build. Not only now are we either hearing a book read, now a teacher is probably going to start asking questions to kind of stimulate if they're recalling the information and if they're connecting the dots of, now what do you think might happen in this story? Or what happened here? Or who do you think this is in the picture? Who have we been talking about? Who might this be? Or what do you think they're going to do next? You're going to start to stimulate more information processing. And then a longer attention span for either information or for playing a game. An early preschooler, if you try to play a game, the minute you sit down and get everything set up and start to play, they get up and run off. As you transition to the end of the later years for a preschooler, their attention span is going to grow, and you may even get the complete reverse. You're going to want to get up, and they don't want to leave until the game is complete to the very end, regardless of what else is going on. So attention span will increase. Vocabulary growth, they typically are going to grow probably 10 to 20 words per day. Where do they get this increase in vocabulary, especially for an early preschooler? Watch the caregiver, who they're around the most, what they're listening to. So if it's something on a screen, that's where they're going to pull their 10 to 20 words, which is kind of frightening and scary in and of itself. Whoever their caregiver is someone talking to them and reading them books and nurturing and fostering a very healthy vocabulary words that are going to enter in and formulate their permanent vocabulary? Or do you have some, and they're just picking up what they can along the way? And you can grow into a healthy vocabulary either way, but knowing that that's what you're going to pull from when you're verbalizing, that's important to note. If you don't want a child repeating something, then don't expose them to that, especially in the preschool years. Understanding is incomplete. We've already mentioned that. There are holes in their ability to understand and fully comprehend. Even though they're taking in and processing a lot of information, they're not able to fully process that and understand and be able to then interpret that. So they are more or less taking in and then just mulling that around to process it. And that's why if you foster questions and inquisitive nature, that's why we need a lot of patient preschool teachers that can answer questions after question after question, because that is formulating and connecting the dots and their ability to understand the world around them. This is also the child that will take things very literally. This is not a child that you would say, forget it then, go jump off a bridge. I mean, they would take that as literally. This is a child, if you reference it's raining cats and dogs, they're going to look up in the sky and hold their hands out and hope to catch a dog. This is very, very literal during this stage. Growth in language learning, language forming sentences of greater length. So now you can see even in a preschool workbook, it'll start with the dog is red, to now the sentence as they transition through is the dog's name is Jack and he is fluffy and red and lives in Oklahoma. Whatever the case may be, you're going to add more, and now the preschooler is able to grab, and they want those added details so that they can grasp onto the story, because their attention span is getting longer and they're becoming more and more inquisitive and they want to know more, and they're going to be able to repeat a good bit of this as they formulate those connections. They'll be able to interpret and say, I wonder if that dog if there's also a cat that lives there, I wonder if he's, what color his collar was. Do you think he lives on a farm? Do you think he lives in the city? They can start to be inquisitive and want to know more and care about that dog and be very empathetic for that dog. That's where their strong points are, as far as they would feel empathy and be in that moment, as far as characters and symbols. In stories, they can grab onto that, and that's going to grasp their interest and help them to aid in a longer attention span. So Vygotsky's scaffolding is the support for learning and problem solving, encourages independence and growth. This is specific. The ZPD, Zone of Proximal Development, is specific to Vygotsky's. Okay, so potential a child may achieve through guided participation. Talking to yourself. Preschoolers frequently talk to themselves, and that's okay. That's fostering learning. As they hear their vocab and think in language, companionship, voice gives to race cars, baby dolls, and fire engines. They can create the sounds and the play and the interactive play as they explore the world around them. And they're known to be loud and very energetic and very, very passionate about whatever it is that they are doing. That's why it's sometimes hard to redirect a preschooler. But as far as the scaffolding, this is where a caregiver or teacher, whoever it might be, is going to come alongside, and you help them independently foster that relationship where they master a skill. You don't do it for them, or they won't learn the skill. If you constantly zip up the winter coat, they'll never learn to zip up the winter coat. So you want to help. This time I'm going to show you. Then I want you to, then we're going to unzip it, and then you do it for me. Or this time, this is how you do this activity in school. But I'm going to show you the first one. Then I want you to do the second, and then I'll do the third, you do the fourth, and eventually you get where I'll do the first one, you do the rest, and you just support. It's like it sounds, scaffolding. You get a solid foundation, and you're not criticizing them or ridiculing them if they're not getting it. They feel that it's fostering a healthy independence, and then you continue to build on that. So the zone of proximal development, here's what I know. Here's what I need to know, what I don't know yet. And then in between there, you see if you look at that slide, skills too difficult for a child to master on his or her own, but that can be done with guidance and encouragement from a knowledgeable person in that area. So as I mentioned, it's a caregiver, it's a teacher, Sunday school teacher, whoever it is. This is what I know. This is the basis of what I know. And here's all the stuff that I don't yet know. So as I try to tackle these things and master something, I need a little bit of guidance. And this is the proximal development of the process of learning. So whatever the skill may be, in a fostering an independence in a healthy environment, patience is critical in here. But I'm not going to do it for you, but I'm going to guide you over. Same way as the analogy of fishing. I can go fish and then give you the fish, and yes, you gain the fish in that moment, but you haven't mastered how you can get the fish yourself. So I need to take the process of, I know how to fish, let me show you the steps, let me show you how to go through that, how you can do these things yourself. Not saying fishing for a preschooler, just these things of don't just give them the fish. You got to teach them the steps on how to get it themselves. It's just in that analogy. So television and media, I've already kind of touched on this. Education and learning programs on whether it's the internet, on screens, those are great. We're fostering, we're connecting those dots. We're teaching some independence that they can do it on their own. The quest for knowledge and appropriate information being input is key. It should be avoided, though, for children's under the age of 2 is what research shows. A child's brain develops rapidly during the first few years. So a child can learn best by interacting with people, not necessarily with screens. There's a lot of interactive games and apps out there that are very beneficial, but whenever possible, that human interaction, especially when you know they role model what you do. So if a teacher or a caregiver or an older sibling can model those behaviors, that's going to foster a very healthy learning environment for that preschooler. Also, when they are around screens, it's critical for the preschooler that the caregiver is right there with them. So if something is inappropriate for a preschooler, they may not know that it's not inappropriate. And you may come in or hear them say a word and be just appalled that they would say that, but how would they know that that is an inappropriate word or action if they see it on a screen and they're not supervised during that moment? So excessive screen time also correlates, not only thinking cognitively, now we also want to think preschool stage. This is where habits are forming, okay? This is what I did my dissertation on, so I'm incredibly passionate about this particular area. But what also comes as a preschooler forming those habits, so what they're thinking, they're seeing, they're doing at this stage is all becoming habits. So what's critical is if I do set a preschooler in front of a screen for hours on end a day, what oftentimes correlates with this is also obesity. So if I'm in front of a screen, I'm not outside playing. And yes, I acknowledge there can be a balance. And there can be a very healthy balance with both. But just keeping on the radar that obesity often accompanies a sedentary lifestyle that is also often indicative of excess screen time. And it's very easy for screens to become an entertainment and a babysitter that in the end, when that becomes habit, that child is going to gravitate towards that and not going outside and trying to master a new skill, especially for a preschooler that may not be obviously an avid soccer player or a highly skilled basketball player, but how do they learn that? As they practice it. So when they're at home or whatever they're doing, if they're encouraged to go out and get exercise and practice a skill, they can build on that skill and grow in confidence, which will blossom into team building and relationships. But if their natural gravitation over habits that were formed in preschool years is to go and sit in their room on a screen, or everywhere I go, I stare at a screen, it's going to be hard to break that child out of that habit and encourage them then to go later on in life and take up a new sport when they haven't started it until later, maybe into childhood or worse, into adolescence. So taking those and learning those skills early and letting that take precedence over screen time is critical. So media and sleep is also related. Screens at night have been linked to decreased sleep in a preschooler. And when we're already battling with wanting to make sure we have appropriate thoughts and communication and actions, obviously sleep is critical. So anything that may even slightly deprive from sleep is going to be discouraged during this stage, as well as even older siblings that watch things that are scary, whatever, even if it's not scary to an adolescent, it could be terrifying to a preschooler. So if they see these images and then we tuck them in and say, good night, sweet dreams, that can be a very difficult process and take a while for the preschool child that's trying to connect dots and that views this as being very real. A monster, something that we know is completely fabricated and this is not real in any sense, they may take as very real and about to burst out of their closet and attack them. So these are the things to be careful with as well and can actually disrupt proper sleep for the preschooler. Daycare centers, preschools, aftercare programs, whatever the case may be, when we know we have a sponge that's absorbing everything that they see and hear, we want to be very careful and encourage people that are seeking aftercare or daycare settings, even their school, that they feel very comfortable that it's a healthy and nurturing environment for that preschooler. The hurried child, this is again, what I've mentioned a couple times along the way, we're in a society now where it can be argued that we don't just let kids be kids and play and learn and develop and progress on their own timeline. As caregivers, oftentimes we have our foot on the accelerator, and in doing so, we are applying an insane amount of pressure on kids, where they feel constantly hurried to master things, and they don't have time to just foster and nurture these things and process on their own timeline. Whether we're trying to keep up with the family next door, or we're trying to keep up just with society, or we have our sights as a preschool parent or caregiver, our sights are clear out on that they get a scholarship in college. And in doing that, we kind of create a false sense where the preschooler, I'm inquisitive and I'm trying to gain independence, but I can't do anything fast enough. I can't do anything good enough. And what that can result in is a very frustrated child that loses their sense of inquiry. And that is what we don't want in the preschool child. So this has concluded chapter 7 for the preschool child. And if you have any questions on the preschooler, please reach out to me. And just know the different scientists that we've had involved with it. And always know Erickson, always know Vygotsky's was in here, and Piaget's, to know the stages that a preschool child falls into. Those are going to be critical for chapter 7. Any questions though, please reach out to me.